wait just a darn minute. Oh, excuse me for talking ugly.
It was the fall of 1960, and most people in television didn't believe a simple show about a small-town sheriff in North Carolina had any business competing on Monday night primetime. They were wrong. It never left the Nielsen Top 10. It ended as the #1 show on television, and then it was gone, canceled by the man whose name was on it. This is the story of the rise and fall of the Andy Griffith Show, why it ended at its peak.
I'll give her the money in the morning.
Looks like you're not the only Simon Legree in this town.
Part 1. Where it all started. To understand the Andy Griffith Show, you have to understand where Andy Griffith himself came from and what he was trying to build. Andy Samuel Griffith was born on June 1st, 1926, in Mount Airy, North Carolina, a small town that would eventually become the real-world stand-in for the fictional Mayberry. He grew up in a modest household, developed an early love of music, and studied at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill with an original intention to become an opera singer. He pivoted to education, taught music briefly, and came to national attention in the early 1950s, not as an actor, but as a monologist. His recording of What It Was Football, a comic monologue from the point of view of a country innocent, bewildered by a football game, became a massive hit in 1953 and spread across radio stations and record stores with the speed of a word-of-mouth sensation. He followed it with work in radio, stage, and eventually Broadway, where he starred in the original production of No Time for Sergeants beginning in 1955, playing a cheerful, resourceful mountain boy drafted into the Air Force who baffles every authority figure he encounters. That show introduced him to the young comedian Don Knotts, who played a small supporting role. The two men hit it off personally, and their comedic chemistry, even in limited scenes together, was apparent to everyone watching. Griffith's film career launched shortly after. Elia Kazan's A Face in the Crowd in 1957 was a serious dramatic vehicle that showed an entirely different register. Griffith playing a charismatic, manipulative media figure with a dark edge that surprised audiences expecting the folksy comedian. The film is still considered a significant work and demonstrated that Griffith had a much wider range than his public persona suggested. Then came the film version of No Time for Sergeants in 1958, which gave him a mainstream hit and further established his persona.
I said, I didn't know you were out of work. He says, yes, Steve was canceled. I said, Carl.
The television version of Griffith's career began through a deliberate arrangement. Sheldon Leonard, the producer and director already running The Danny Thomas Show on CBS, had his eye on Griffith as a potential series lead. Rather than go through the expense and uncertainty of a conventional pilot, Leonard used a more efficient method. He had his writing staff develop an episode of The Danny Thomas Show in which Danny Thomas, playing himself as a combustible New York entertainer, is driving through a small North Carolina town and gets stopped by the local sheriff for running a stop sign. The sheriff, calm, unhurried, quietly amused, completely unintimidated by Thomas's protests and celebrity, holds him overnight. Thomas sputters and fumes. The sheriff simply waits him out. The episode aired on February 15th, 1960, and the response to Griffith's sheriff character was immediate and enthusiastic. CBS gave the go-ahead for a series.
Stand erect, man. Posture. Come on. Chin in, chest out, hips forward. Suck in that gut.
Part 2, Building Mayberry. Production on The Andy Griffith Show began in the summer of 1960 at Desilu Studios in Hollywood. From the start, the show's underlying philosophy was simple. Mayberry would be a town where problems were solved through patience, common sense, and decency rather than force. Sheriff Andy Taylor carried no gun. He had no need for one. His authority came from the trust and affection of the community around him, and from the fact that he was genuinely wiser than the situations he walked into. Griffith understood the role in a specific way that he articulated years later. The show's world, he told a Today Show interviewer, was set in the present-day 1960s, but felt emotionally like the 1930s, a time gone by. The nostalgia was built into the premise from the beginning. Mayberry wasn't trying to reflect contemporary America. It was trying to show people something they recognize from memory or from imagination, a slower, steadier version of life where neighbors knew each other, disputes were personal rather than institutional, and the worst thing that regularly happened was the town drunk locking himself in jail. That town drunk was Otis Campbell, played by Hal Smith, the only regular cast member who checked himself in and out of the cell, which was one of the show's running visual jokes. He'd arrive on Friday night, announce himself as under arrest, lock himself in, and let himself out once he'd sobered up.
And he'd show up. And so finally I said, making the soloist. And then I talked him into speaking his.
The joke never wore out because Hal Smith played it with such cheerful self-awareness. The courthouse set became the show's second home after the Taylor house, and almost everything about it was warm and unhurried. There was no urgency. That was the point. The theme music was composed by Earl Hagen, who also performed the whistling in the opening sequence. He later said the tune took him about 10 minutes to write, that he woke up one morning thinking it needed to be simple enough to whistle, and that the demo he made, just the whistle, a string bass, and drums, became the final version. Sheldon Leonard heard it and immediately said he wanted to shoot Andy and Opie walking to a fishing hole. That image, father, son, fishing poles, a warm afternoon, became one of the most recognizable opening sequences in American television history. The show aired on Monday evenings right after The Danny Thomas Show, its parent series, which meant it inherited a warm audience that had already been primed by Danny Thomas's domestic comedy just 30 minutes earlier. That scheduling gave the show a running start in its first season, when it debuted to strong numbers and never looked back. Frances Bevier brought Aunt Bee to the show as a supporting cast member from the beginning. Bevier had spent decades on Broadway and in Hollywood character roles before landing the part. She had even played a recurring role on Dragnet and guest starred on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Her Aunt Bee was warm but not soft, capable and quietly sharp, a woman who ran a household with genuine competence while making it look like affectionate domesticity. Bavier won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Performance in a supporting role in 1967 for her work on the show, one of 6 Emmys the series cast collectively earned. And then there was Don Knotts.
He has just proposed to me.
I did?
Oh, congratulations. Oh, my boy.
Part 3, The Heart of the Show. Don Knotts didn't wait to be offered the part of Barney Fife. He pursued it. When Knotts watched the backdoor pilot episode air on The Danny Thomas Show in February 1960, he recognized immediately what the series could be. He and Griffith had stayed in loose touch since No Time for Sergeants, and Knotts picked up the phone and called his old friend during the show's development. His pitch was direct. The sheriff character needed a deputy, and that deputy should be his comic foil. Nervous, pompous, well-meaning, and catastrophically incapable. Griffith agreed and brought Knotts in to audition for Sheldon Leonard. Leonard signed him to a 5-year contract as Barney Fife. The character Knotts created was one of the most fully realized comic constructions in the history of American television. Barney was all contradiction, deeply insecure, yet wildly self-important, completely ineffective, yet passionately devoted to law and order, ridiculous in almost everything he did, and yet somehow lovable in every frame. His most famous recurring visual element was the single bullet he carried in his shirt pocket rather than in his gun, a detail that encoded his entire character in one image. He'd been trusted with the weapon, but not with the ammunition that made it useful. He had shot himself in the foot with it once, which was why the arrangement had been made in the first place. Knotts himself wrote many of Barney's best scenes, contributing material that Griffith and the show's writers then polished further. The creative investment showed.
Andy was the guy who continued to say, let's not do jokes. He'd say, if it sounds like...
What could have been a simple buffoon character developed over 5 seasons into someone with genuine pathos, a man who knew at some level that the gap between his self-image and his actual abilities was enormous, and who kept trying anyway. The romance between Barney and Thelma Lou, played by Betty Lynn, gave the character a warmth and vulnerability that made even his most absurd moments feel grounded in something recognizably human. The chemistry between Griffith and Knotts operated on a specific axis. Griffith played almost entirely straight, patient, gently amused, occasionally exasperated but never cruel, always giving Barney room to self-destruct at his own pace. Knotts delivered the physical and verbal comedy. Ron Howard, playing Opie, recalled watching Griffith on set as Knotts performed. Andy was often in tears from laughing, sometimes requiring multiple takes because he couldn't hold it together. That delight was genuine, and it translated through the screen. Don Knotts won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series 5 times for the role of Barney Fife. 3 of those Emmys came consecutively from 1961 through 1963, during the first 3 seasons of the show. He also won the award in 1966 and 1967, when he had already left the show as a series regular and was only returning for guest appearances. That final pair of Emmys was awarded for guest spots, which says everything about how much the performance had meant to the Television Academy.
This uniform.
That? Put that on?
Sure. Why not?
Part 4. The show at its height. By the early 1960s, The Andy Griffith Show had settled into its groove and found an audience of remarkable loyalty. The show never placed lower than 7th in the Nielsen ratings during its entire 8-year run. In its first season, it came in 4th. For several seasons, it held positions in the top 5. The audience didn't just watch it, they watched it every week, consistently, in a way that few television programs have managed to sustain. The supporting cast deepened around the core 4. Jim Nabors appeared as the lovably naive gas station attendant Gomer Pyle, beginning in season 3, first in December 1962, and quickly became a fan favorite with his combination of bottomless good nature and genuine singing talent. The character was introduced as a background figure and gradually expanded as audiences responded to him. Howard McNear played Floyd the Barber, talkative, slightly scatterbrained, providing a gentle comic counterpoint to the main storylines. McNear suffered a stroke during the show's run that left him partially paralyzed on one side. The production accommodated him by staging his scenes so he could remain seated or supported, because they didn't want to lose the character.
Then it scared the heck out of me, and I told all of them, the producers and the director, everyone else.
George Lindsay came in as Goober Pyle, Gomer's cousin, after the 4th season, taking over the gas station role once Gomer departed. Annetta Corsaw played Helen Crump, the school teacher who became Andy's love interest and eventual wife. The show was also, in its quiet way, unusual for its era in how it handled conflict. Most of the problems in Mayberry didn't have villains. When someone came to Andy with a dispute, it was usually because 2 reasonable people saw something differently or someone made a mistake they were too proud to admit. Andy's consistent approach was to diffuse rather than escalate, to find the dignity in whoever he was dealing with, and to let people arrive at the right answer themselves when possible. That approach was radical by the conventions of episodic television, where conflict was typically sharpened to generate plot momentum. In Mayberry, the plots often dissolved. By the time the spin-off series Gomer Pyle, USMC launched in September 1964, spinning directly out of the fourth season's backdoor pilot episode, the Griffith show's universe had expanded into something with its own gravity. Gomer Pyle ran until 1969 and was itself enormously successful, a military sitcom that took the sweetness of Mayberry and transplanted it to a Marine Corps base, with Frank Sutton's drill sergeant Vince Carter filling the Barney Fife role of the person most undone by the lead character's obliviousness. At its peak, Gomer Pyle was pulling ratings competitive with the parent show, a remarkable achievement for a spin-off built around a supporting character.
I don't understand it.
Well, if Barney doesn't want his picture taken, that's okay by me. See you, Andy.
See you, Farley.
Part 5. The Crack in the Foundation. The beginning of a shift came in 1965, and it started with a misunderstanding. Andy Griffith and Don Knotts had both signed 5-year contracts when the show launched in 1960. As the 5th season wound down, Griffith told Knotts, as he had on several occasions, that he intended to end the show at the 5-year mark. He said the same thing to others. Based on those conversations, Knotts began planning his next move. He had already appeared in The Incredible Mr. Limpet in 1964, his first significant film role, and the experience had given him confidence. He approached Universal Studios and negotiated a 5-year film deal. By the time the contract was signed, he was committed. Then Griffith changed his mind. CBS wanted more. The show was still in the top 5. The audience was enormous. The money was significant. Griffith agreed to extend, and when he went to tell Knotts, Knotts was already locked into Universal. I left because Andy said he would never do the show more than 5 years, Knotts explained in interviews afterward. If I had known that Andy intended to go on with it, of course I would have stayed. Both men later described it as a genuine miscommunication rather than a falling out, and their personal friendship endured. Knotts returned for guest appearances in seasons 6, 7, and 8, earning 2 more Emmy Awards for those guest turns, and the 2 men stayed close until Knotts' death in February 2006. Knotts' film career at Universal produced a string of successful family comedies: The Ghost and Mr. Chicken in 1966, The Reluctant Astronaut in 1967, The Shakiest Gun in the West in 1968, that were popular with general audiences and did well commercially, but none of them came close to what he had built in Mayberry. Later in life, in interviews where both men were present, Griffith and Knotts acknowledged that The Andy Griffith Show was the finest work either of them ever did. The misunderstanding that split them from it was something they both came to understand in that way.
Barney could do anything. We had that show called Barney and the Choir.
But the show without Barney Fife was a different show. The 6th season, which premiered in September 1965, made 2 changes simultaneously. It transitioned to color production, and it replaced Barney Fife with a new deputy named Warren Ferguson, played by comedian and writer Jack Burns. Warren was written out after only 11 episodes of the 30-episode season. The attempt to find a functional replacement for Knotts' comic energy was abandoned, and for the final 3 seasons, Andy essentially worked without a permanent deputy. The core dynamic that had generated so much of the show's laughter, the specific friction between Andy's patience and Barney's volatility, simply no longer existed. The color transition was more than a technical change. Something in the show's visual identity shifted with it. The black and white seasons had a texture that suited the show's nostalgic emotional register, a quality that matched the world Griffith described as feeling like the 1930s, even while being filmed in the 1960s. The color episodes were warmer in palette, but somehow cooler in feeling. The show's most devoted audiences have consistently favored the black and white seasons 1 through 5, by a wide margin. Those are the episodes that dominate reruns on classic television channels, the ones most often cited by people who remember watching the show in its original run, the ones that feel most like Mayberry in the way Mayberry was meant to feel. The show also subtly shifted its emphasis in the later seasons. Andy's police work became less central to each episode. Stories focused more on the domestic life of the Taylor household and on the ensemble of supporting characters. The sheriff without a deputy was a different dramatic engine, quieter, less dynamic, relying more heavily on the charm of the setting than on the specific friction between two great performers doing their best work together. The audience stayed, but something had changed.
They live in a whole different world.
They're different, all right.
You got Sophia. You know, every time I come within 5 feet of...
Part 6. The End at the Top. Ratings didn't fall. That's the remarkable thing. Without Barney Fife, without the show's most dynamic comic engine, The Andy Griffith Show continued to climb in the Nielsen ratings through seasons 6, 7, and 8. Season 8, the final one, aired from September 1967 through April 1968 and finished the year as the #1 show on all of American television. Not in its time slot, not on Monday nights. #1 overall. CBS did not cancel it. Andy Griffith did. In a 1998 interview with the Archive of American Television, Griffith explained his thinking. He had been doing the show for 8 years. He had lost the creative partnership with Knotts that had energized the best years. The show's shift to color and to a more conventional sitcom format had changed how it felt from the inside.
The friendships that we made during those years have been with me all of my life.
I wasn't doing the series justice because I had done it for so long, he said. My concentration just wasn't there, and I wanted to try other things. He also said he was afraid he was no longer holding up his end of the bargain, that the show deserved more than he was giving it, and that walking away while it was still successful was the right thing to do. The final episode aired on April 1st, 1968. In it, Andy Taylor married Helen Crump and made plans to leave Mayberry for a new job in Raleigh, handing the town's day-to-day life over to a new character named Sam Jones, played by Ken Berry, who would carry Mayberry RFD, the successor series that launched in September 1968. The Mayberry RFD series ran for 3 more seasons and carried many of the same supporting characters before CBS dropped it along with all of its rural-themed programming in 1971, a network-wide decision to chase younger urban demographics.
Try to talk to Barney one more time.
Andy, don't you think you should change your mind and run?
Now, Howard.
Part 7. What It Left Behind. The Andy Griffith Show went into syndication and proved to be one of the most durable television properties in American broadcasting history. Reruns ran on local stations across the country for decades. The show was retitled Andy of Mayberry for syndication to distinguish reruns from original episodes. It found new generations of viewers consistently, particularly the black and white seasons, which translated across time in a way that many 1960s productions did not. As of 2017, the show had been in continuous syndication for 53 years, appearing somewhere on American television in every single one of those years. TV Guide ranked it among the greatest American television series of all time, 9th on one list, 13th on another. The show received no acting Emmy for Andy Griffith himself during its run, an omission that later seemed almost inexplicable given the precision and warmth of his performance across 249 episodes. Don Knotts won 5, Francis Bavier won 1. The show and its star were somehow too fundamental to the landscape to be recognized by the awards apparatus of the time. Griffith himself accepted this with characteristic equanimity. Ron Howard, Opie Taylor, age 6 when the show began, carried what he absorbed in those years with him throughout the rest of his career. He spoke about it in specific terms: the generosity Griffith showed to Knotts in their performances together, the willingness to let his partner be funnier, the discipline of playing straight when straight was the right call. Howard went from The Griffith Show to the lead role in American Graffiti in 1973, then to Happy Days from 1974 to 1980, and then into directing Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, Frost/Nixon, and many others. He won the Academy Award for Best Director for A Beautiful Mind in 2002. He has credited the education he received on the Griffith set, from the time he was 6 years old, as a foundation he never stopped drawing from. Andy Griffith himself came back to television in 1986 with Matlock, a legal drama in which he played Ben Matlock, a shrewd North Carolina defense attorney that ran until 1995 and gave him a second iconic role. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2005, the nation's highest civilian honor. He died on July 3, 2012, at his home in North Carolina. He was 86. The town of Mount Airy, North Carolina, Andy Griffith's actual hometown, the real town that Mayberry was built from, still celebrates Mayberry Days annually, a festival that draws visitors who want to stand in the place that inspired the show's fictional geography. The streets of a real small town in the American South became proxy locations for a fictional small town in the American imagination that turned out to be more real than most things on television. In 1986, a reunion television film called Return to Mayberry brought most of the surviving original cast together. Don Knotts was there. Ron Howard was there. Most of the supporting cast came back. Francis Bavier, who was ill, could not attend. Andy Griffith himself was there, playing Andy Taylor one more time. Older, a little slower, but recognizably the same man. It drew the largest audience for a television movie that season. 8 seasons, 249 episodes. Number 1 when it ended, gone because the man whose name was on it decided it was time to go. That is the rise and fall of the Andy Griffith Show, and why it ended at its peak. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There is a lot more where this came from.